session of GCAN, GAN Current Affairs and News Analysis. So let us look into yesterday's and today's topic. Yesterday I have picked about 3 topics. Biofuel, sustainability, it was in our editorial section. It talks about economy and environment and the sustainability of the future. Then special session of the parliament, it was in news, and I have actually put a question based on this as well in yesterday's GAN and IS official Lunch Master series. Then we have the Ayushman Bhav campaign regarding health. We have the 2030 global renewable energy target. It is actually mentioned in the editorial of today. Then we have a post office bill 2023, government limits in the wheat stocking and national judicial data grid. So these are the some topics which we have to deal with in today. So moving on to the first, the biofuels sustainability. Now the context is the Global Biofuel Alliance. We know in G20 that a global biofuel alliance was actually created. We know India's biofuel targets. We know the ethanol blending targets of India, where we actually want to achieve about 20% blending of ethanol in petrol and 5% in the case of diesel. So in the G20 concession which actually happened recently, this 20% blending program was actually adopted globally to be achieved. Now this was actually supported by many other countries as well. So based on this Global Biofuel Alliance, we will be actually talking about and what the author actually specifically mentioned in this article. So you see, because of all the climate change and all the commitments of the Paris commitments, Kyoto Protocol and everything out there, there is actually certain commitments made. So with this commitment, there is actually a more striving to adopt a cleaner energy. And the fastest way to adopt much more cleaner energy is by actually changing the transportation system as such. From changing the regular vehicles to e-vehicles, we can actually achieve this cleaner energy and reduce the greenhouse gas emission. So that is actually the more priority majority countries are transferring today. Even in India, we know there is subsidy given to the promotion of electrical vehicles. We have the scooters, we have the cars, e-vehicles as such, which are still in India. So all the countries are actually shifting to much more cleaner energy. But there is actually a significant problem related with this e-vehicle as such. We are looking electrical vehicle alone, there are actually problems. The first thing is, there is a huge cost expenditure that is actually related with it. We have the conventional model of vehicles, but transferring to a pretty much newer technology which we need, newer technology, new kind of skilled labor, everything is very much cost effective. And the thing is that the raw materials, certain raw materials that is actually used like the lithium, cobalt are also expensive, and they are actually critical elements, and also they are rare in earth, because of which the accumulation all this actually increases the cost, or it makes this e-vehicle much more capital extensive exercise. Another problem is that which we need, if we need to actually acquire these kind of materials like lithium and cobalt, we need much more mining. Like in India, we actually import 100% of all the critical elements. Like we know the 10% and 2% and 1%. We have already explored 10% of the landmass area. We just produce about 2%, and the budget allocation for India is just only less than 1% in the case of mining sector. But with the new mining policies that were built, which was came up, the private sectors has been also involved, and 6 more strategic and critical elements has been actually given to the private sector for actually extraction. So the thing is that if we are moving to the e-vehicle sector, we need to actually increase the mining sector as well. Not just the mining sector, that is actually pushed to the industrial sector as well, for the development of the raw material, for the design, for the architecture, for the development, everything. Now this all actually creates much more greenhouse gas emission. The use of e-vehicles may be cleaner, but the development of the transition from the vehicle to the e-vehicle model, the transition phase is actually much more not cleaner, and it's actually not sustainable as well. So if you are looking in this biofuel alliance, the government is actually trying to change its alternative model of e-vehicle, like our shifting focus from e-vehicle and the use of biofuels in our normal cars, so that we can actually reduce the greenhouse gas emission. So we know the first generation, second generation and third generation. The first generation made by food products, second generation by non-food products, and the third generation by microorganisms and such. So this first phase of like the first phase of where we actually use certain foods, like we can use sugar canes, corn, and such were actually used for the production of ethanol. Now the problem is that even for the sugar cane we have the fair and remunerative price by which the government is actually trying to push the development of sugar canes in India. Now the sugar cane is water intensive crop, it is actually a burden of the government for such production, it is actually a burden on the groundwater, and it is actually reducing the amount of groundwater stock that is actually available, and this is actually causing a lot of food security in India as well. So when the certain food crops are actually created, the farmers, what will they do? They will actually transfer this kind of food for the bioethanol production and such, because they might get much profit from there rather than it going to the market. Now that is actually going to create food insecurity in India, that is actually going to create inflation, because the supply and demand is actually not matching, because of which the first generation of bioethanol fuels, like the use of food crops, is actually not sustainable. The problem is that majority of countries actually depend upon the first generation. The e-vehicle usage was not sustainable. There is still usage, but there was shift to first generation. Now this was actually reduce the greenhouse gas emission, better usage, and it actually better usage to it as well. But the problem here is this is also not sustainable, and it actually creates food insecurity, and because of development of this water incentive crops is actually putting much more headache over the government and over the people, and there is creating a lot of inflation, for food inflation, particularly in India. Now this Global Biofuel Alliance actually focuses on the second generation, like using non-food crops for production of bioethanols in India. These non-food crops like the crop residues from the agricultural waste and such can be actually utilized for this production of the second generation biofuels. Now you can see this is much more sustainable, because of which this actually reduces the greenhouse gas emission. They can also, like, this is more like, or it is much more cleaner energy or cleaner type of fuel which we can actually use. So the author is actually praising the initiatives of the G20 to create a global biofuel alliance which actually focus upon the second generation creation of biofuels and not the first generation. The third generation is actually in development, which actually uses microorganisms and such for the development of biofuels. So that was what the author actually states in this entire article. So this is what I have actually taken here. The biofuels right path to future, but still the use of the first generation is actually not sustainable. India has a favorable policy towards sugarcane cultivation, as I have told you, which is actually giving more to the first generation biofuels production and not the second generation. Now that compromise of food security, there is actually a disruption in the supply and demand in the food grains, and then a shift to second generation biofuels made with this Global Biofuel Alliance. That is the first article dealing about. Now we have the special session of the parliament. The context is that the Union Minister actually of the Parliamentary Affairs actually announced a special session in September 2023 this month. Now we know this parliament, the session and such, we have particularly 3 sessions in the parliament right now. We have the budget session, we have the monsoon session, and we have the winter session. Now particularly there is no fixed time period for the sessions in India. Only in the constitution it is mentioned that the gap between 2 particular sessions should not extend between 6 months, should not extend more than 2 months. But there is actually no fixed calendar of sittings in the case of parliaments in India. In 1955, such a Lok Sabha committee was actually created so that they can actually fix a particular calendar for this parliament. But no such, that the committee, what the recommendation made by the committee was actually not implemented. So that is a basic on what the parliamentary session is about. Now if you are looking into special session of the parliament, this special session of the parliament is actually not mentioned in the constitution. This is actually not explicitly mentioned as special sitting in the constitution, but in certain article 352 in the emergency provisions of India, the special sitting of parliament is actually mentioned, so that we can actually take emergency, like emergency proclamation, in the right direction. So only not explicitly mentioned, but just simply mentioned in article 352 as such. Now the special session is actually not like any other regular sessions. This is actually summoned by president, as a normal sitting, like normal parliamentary sitting is actually called by president. This special sitting is actually also summoned by the president under article 85(1). This is actually called by the president under article 85(1), and this also is actually chaired by a presiding officer. But unlike a normal parliamentary session, the special parliamentary session doesn't have anything like what is a normal procedural code, like it won't have any question hour or 0 hour, or the normal parliamentary procedure will not be actually implemented in case of such a special session of the parliament. Now what do you think is this special session of the parliament? Why is such a session actually constituted? Now you see, like, this is not the first time a special session has been actually organized in India. There are many such sessions has been organized to actually commemorate the achievements or any milestone that has been created by the parliament. And now this session is actually called to actually to talk about the 75 years of working of the parliament. So that is actually commemorated in this special session. In the 60th parliamentary anniversary also such a special session was actually created. So that is actually the purpose of this special session. So if you are looking, the constitution actually does not explicitly mention anything about the special session, and it is actually converted in such an occasion like to mention anything about a national milestone or commemorating any of the parliamentary achievements summoned by president, chaired by the presiding officer, and it does not work as a normal parliament. Then the article 352 actually mentions about the special sitting of the parliament, so that we just in the case of emergency it is actually mentioned, and in such a case if a proclamation of the emergency is actually issued and the parliament is not in session, then at least 1/10 of the Lok Sabha MPs can ask the president to convene a special meeting to disapprove the emergency. So that is actually mentioned in article 352. So that is what the special session is actually meaning about. Now moving on, we have the Ayushman Bhav campaign. Now this campaign was actually virtually launched by our President of India. Now this, like, healthcare is actually present in everywhere in India, but this particular Ayushman Bhav campaign actually focuses on the last mile development of healthcare. There are still ground level people who doesn't have access to basic healthcare systems. So this actually ensures the delivery of healthcare to the last mile of India. That is actually specific of this campaign. This is a 15-day campaign which is started in September 17 in 2 days and will last till October 2nd. Now this is not just one. It consists of 3 such initiatives. This Ayushman Bhav campaign is actually an umbrella scheme. Under it has 3 major organs. It has the Ayushman Aapke Dwar 3.0, Ayushman Mela, as well as an Ayushman Sabha. The Sabha will be actually created in all the villages and panchayat so that they can actually get the required healthcare facilities. Then the Ayushman Mela is also there so that they could actually get like about 1 lakh melas will be actually created so that they can actually get more advice and awareness about the basic healthcare that is actually required. Then also Ayushman Aapke Dwar 3.0 is also mentioned as the 3 main campaigns is under this Ayushman Bhav campaign. Now this is actually undertaken by the Health Ministry. The entire campaign is actually based about the public participation or the Jan Bhagirdari or the public participation in India. It also focuses on the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan as well as the Seva Pakwata, that is actually getting the healthcare benefits for an individual person. So all this actually comes under the Ayushman Bhav campaign. Now you can actually maybe get this for prelims or in your mains section. If you want to more enrich it, you can actually mention this Ayushman Bhav campaign. It's actually related to a health kind of means question. Moving on, we have the 2030 Global Renewable Energy Targets. So you see there is upcoming 28th Conference of Parties of the United Nations FCC, Climate Change Convention at Dubai. So before this convention actually rolls out, the Dubai has actually rolled out a global target of its own. It's actually aiming to propose a new target to be achieved by 2030. That is to actually triple the existing RE capacity. That is one of the main aims of this new target that Dubai is actually aiming to propose in this 28th Conference of Parties of Climate Change at Dubai. Now this particular target of tripling renewable energy by 2030 is also mentioned in our G20 New Delhi declarations as well. It's important that you actually go through the present New Delhi declaration. Either just go read one through it and actually make pretty much a little note about this New Delhi declaration, so you can actually use it in your mains answer for the introduction, conclusion, or for the enriching of your answers. So such targets are also mentioned in our G20 New Delhi declaration. But there are some concerns that is actually related with this new target that has been established by Dubai. The first thing is that it's a very tight deadline. Like there are at least 7 years. In 7 years, we have to actually triple this The renewable energy target is not actually a very simple task. It's a heinous task. Then we have increased cost. Developed country may be able to achieve this, but what are the developing countries? What are the underdeveloped countries? So how much burden would this actual target put upon these smaller countries? So that is one thing. And then equitability. Historically, we know the developed countries are the emitters, but presently the blame falls on developing countries like India and China, like we are actually putting much more pollutants. So there is actually always a trouble about equity, about the declaration of equity, how much responsibility goes to developed countries and how much responsibility goes to developing countries. So these three are some of the three concerns that is actually highlighted by the author in this article. So let us look into the present state of present state of renewable energy capacity we have now, what we can actually achieve in the future, and let's just look into much more detail the concerns mentioned here. So if you are looking here, the current adaptation of renewable energy in the world. So if you are looking, the global installed capacity now presently about 3,226 gigawatt of electricity is actually installed capacity of renewable energy, or it actually composed out of 100%, 39% of the electricity is produced via this renewable energy. So if you are looking, if we need to double this target, it will come close to about 9,000 gigawatts of renewable energy to be achieved, targets to be achieved by about 2030. Now from 3,000 to 9,000. Do you think it is actually a very easy target? Like for all the countries to be achieve and come together to contribute about 9,000 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity is not a very small target now. But the total, like we have an installed capacity of about 39%, but this renewable energy capacity only contribute to about 28% of the electricity generation. Like you can see that operational cost is there. Not all this energy, like renewable energy capacity, is actually working simultaneously. So because of which the contribution is just 28%. And if you are looking mainly out of this 28% or 39% of contribution, hydropower actually contributes to about 50%. Sorry, this is not 10, this is 50%. The hydroelectric power actually contribute to about 50%, whereas the solar contribute to about 13% and wind contribute to about 23%. These three, the hydro, solar and wind, totally account to about 36% of the renewable energy targets renewable energy out of this 39% that is actually produced using this renewable energy. So that is now the present state of global distribution of the renewable energy targets that is actually met. Now about this 2030 global renewable energy targets, we are telling that we need to achieve about 9,000 gigawatt, like 9078 gigawatt if we are talking to be actual sense, 9,000 gigawatt of target. The thing is that most of the capacity is expected to come from solar and wind energy. You can't develop a hydropower electric plant within 7 years, but you can actually do the same with, you can actually develop solar and wind energy within this 7 years of minimal time period. You can't actually develop that kind with the hydroelectric power plant in 7 years. So it's actually thought that majority of the capacity will actually come from the solar and wind energy. Now this means like more than hydroelectric, like the solar and wind energy are much more like capital intensive and they require much more increased expenditure. Now this actually puts a burden upon this underdeveloping and developing countries. They are also in need of this materials and technology to actually improve the solar energy and the wind energy kind of renewable energy resources in India. Also, regionally there is a differentiated energy needs. Not all countries require this renewable energy capacity. Like India might need, because we are still dependent a lot on coal and our renewable energy capacity is pretty much less than the amount of coal usage we have. So we might require regionally energy needs. But the developed countries like EU and USA, who actually have achieved a lot of their renewable energy target, may not need this much capacity. So regionally there is actually different rates of energy, and the the rate of growth also varies between these kinds of countries. So if you are looking, as I have told you, the developed countries are historical emitters and they should take actually more responsibility into this. But the thing is that if such a target, 2030 target comes about, much of the burden is actually put on this sectors like India, developing countries like India, to actually generate this renewable energy target. So if you are looking at this, the electricity consumption in like countries, Asian countries like India and China, they have actually increased by 6.6% in the case of China. It has increased by about 6.3% in the case of India. But if you are looking the countries like European Union, their electricity consumption actually has reduced by about minus 0.3%. Whereas for USA, there has only been a very nominal growth, about 0.12%. If you are comparing the growth rate, like India and China, they require much more energy consumption. We have crossed about more than 6%. Whereas the West and the global North, they only require a very small percentage of energy consumption. So, you can see the burden put upon this developing countries for the creation of such renewable energy targets in India. Now, certain new targets, these actually put burden on the developing countries. As I have told you, as you can see here, China and India, we are the developing countries. We have a requirement of this energy consumption, much more energy consumption is actually needed here. But the particular burden of development of this renewable energy capacity is actually put on this India, China and such. This burden doesn't actually come in this global West nation countries like EU and USA. It is evident that any substantial renewable energy addition in the EU and USA must come from an accelerated phase out of their fossil fuel use by 2030. So, this is actually the present situation of this energy consumption of the world. So, you can see here like US and China, they don't require much more. If like for USA to actually achieve this target by 2030, they just need the development about 26 gigawatt, which is only about 0.4% of this 2030 target mentioned by Dubai. So, but for India, we require about 717 gigawatt, which is actually about 12% of the target. So, that is the difference between India and USA. India to achieve this, for USA to achieve this target, they just need to develop about 26 gigawatt and they will say that they have actually reached the target. But for India, we are way behind and in development phase, we require about 717 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity to be installed by 2030. Then only we will achieve the target that is actually put forward by Dubai, and this 717 is actually close to 12%. Look at the 0.4% of USA, look at the 12% of India. So, how is the burden shifting? The burden of this renewable energy capacity to be installed is actually put on countries like India and not on the developed countries like the USA. So, that is how the change is actually mentioned by the author here. So, as I have told you, USA needs only about 26 gigawatt to actually reach 0.4% of the target. India needs 717 gigawatt and that is actually 12% of the target. Now, this model lacks equity. The developed countries have been the historical emitters. We are not the historical emitters. India, China, we are not the historical emitters. So, the burden and the responsibility has to be taken by this developed country. So, at the COP28 that is going to be happening in Dubai, it is actually the author mentioned that the developed countries should consider the target only if the developing countries should consider the target only if the North, like they commit to absolute targets also. The global North also equitably take the targets along with the developing countries. So, that is actually mentioned by the author in this article. Moving on, we have the Post Office Bill of 2023. Now, the previous Post Office Act is actually about 1898, which is actually a pre-colonial law created by the British. Now, this Post Office Bill of 2023 will actually replace this law, and this present bill is actually tabled in the Rajya Sabha presently. So, let us look into some of the what are the measures that provisions that are actually mentioned in this Post Office Bill. So, the Director General of Postal Service will make regulations. So, before this bill was introduced in the previous bill, it stated that even to make a little bit change, even to raise the money concerned or raise the services, everything actually needed parliamentary approval. That was actually hindering in the development of postal office. Now, there is not just post office present in India. There are a lot of private players out there which is actually becoming a competition for the post office. Now, even after a long time, post office actually have remained in the stand, means that they have been actually developing year on and actually has taken up stance along with this current change in technology and such. So, in this new provision, the Director General of the Postal Service will be actually given the power to regulate. Because of the regulations given now, they don't need to get any parliamentary approval for each and every services that actually they want to provide. Now, the power to intercept shipments. Like you can actually transfer bomb through bomb or drugs and anything which actually affects the national security and public interest. So such a kind of parcel, if they actually meant get anything, they could actually intercept it and actually go through it. Now with this new, the power has been reduced, like means that if they can only go through a certain packages, if it actually threatens the security of the state, friendly relation with the foreign state, the public order and also the provisions of the bill or anything, in only certain cases they can actually intercept the shipments. Otherwise they can, just based on some suspicion, they can actually they cannot intercept such shipment. Now that is actually reducing the power, and this also reduces the power of the post office. Also that of the reduces the power to intercept such kind of criminal offences or terrorist activities that may actually take place via this porting. Now also this bill address about transitioning to a digital model, like to get a pin code, digital pin code, and then also deliver these kind of parcels via drones and such. So such kind of technology also transversing, like digital pin code, so that postman could know which address goes where. So that is also addressed in this new bill. Also proper definition or to the letter. Earlier there was actually doubt about the definition of letter or document or how it was actually done. So what kind of post or qualification that actually goes into this, and the like the definition of letter was actually a very grave concern, like a problem here. So that was also resolved and a proper definition is actually given to the letter. It also drops the exclusive privilege of the central government over the transfers of the letters and such, because there are also regional private players here. So these are some of the main initiatives or proposals that is actually mentioned in this new bill. In the further articles, in the further newspapers, you can actually get more details about this new post office bill. Moving on, government limits wheat stock holding. Now like wheat stock holding, by the Essential Commodities Act of 1955, the government regulating certain holdings of the wheat and rice and food grains for the future, like buffer stocks and such. But this was actually misused by a lot of middlemen and such, and they started holding it more. Like if they are holding the wheat, which means that the price of the supply of the wheat will decrease, this will actually increase the price of the wheat in the future. So they actually, some called middlemen actually hold on to this wheat. To avoid this, the central government has came with that, they have actually reduced this stock holding of wheat from about 3000 metric ton to about 2000 metric ton. So this will actually avoid this artificial scarcity that is actually created by the hoarding. Next we have the PM Matsya Sampad Yojana. So if you are seeing here, India is now the third largest. We are now counted among the world's 3 countries in fish and aquaculture production. Third largest in the fish and aquaculture production. Now with this union budget also about 6,000 crores was actually provided for the development of the PM Matsya Sampada Yojana. Now this is a part of a blue economic model, blue economy and the promotion. Even in 2020 this initiative was actually launched, and in subsequent month, even in the union budget, the budget was actually raised for the creation of the blue economy. So if you are looking in this article, we have the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana, and this actually helped in generating a lot of jobs. As per this initiative, 55 lakh were job directly and indirectly was actually mentioned as well. Now this actually to enhance or increase the fish production. Now we are in the third stance in aquaculture and fish production, to actually limit or increase the production of 220 LMT tons of fish to be actually increase. Also 20,000 crores of investment in the coming 5 years are actually mentioned here. Double the fisherman's income and such was also mentioned. So such a scheme, by this we have actually now reached the third position all over the world in the case of production of fish and aquaculture production. Moving on to a last topic, we have the National Judicial Data Grid. Now this grid was actually created to reduce the number of pending cases in the judiciary. Now this is based on the open data policy, like even if the judgment comes out, that will be available to you for to read in this portal of this National Judicial Data Grid. So as per the recent targets, about 64,858 registered cases are pending, and 15,490 unregistered cases are still pending in the judiciary. But the cases that are filed in August, about 5,400 something cases was filed in August. Of that, about 5,000 cases was actually disposed. So which means that with the new development of digital technology and such, the efficiency of the courts are increasing to reduce the pendency of the cases. So this National Judicial Data Grid actually substantiate the development of the judiciary in the case of reducing the pending cases. So this was actually an initiative that is actually mentioned in news. So that is it for today. It has been a lengthy section. I have covered every topics, that important topics from yesterday and tomorrow. Please go through the video. I'll be seeing you again tomorrow on Friday. Thank you and have a nice day.